I think we'll just go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our Estrella webinar. My name is Christina Dooley and I am a certified educational planner and I am the president of Estrella Consulting, which is a college planning firm based in Ohio. And I'm thrilled to have this webinar this evening. I think it's an incredibly timely webinar. And when we planned this, we didn't realize just how timely it would be. And I'm even more excited because as much as I would love to spend the next 30 minutes or so sharing with you information about campus safety and crime and how to best arm yourself with the information that you need, I am thrilled because I actually have a guest who I think can help us navigate some of those questions even better than I can. So without further ado, I want to introduce Paul Owens from Case Western Reserve University. And Paul, if you want to just take a second and just share a little bit about you with the audience, that would be great.
Thanks, Christina. As she said, my name is Paul Owens. I am the Chief of Police at Case Western Reserve University Police Department, which is located in Cleveland, Ohio. I've been with the police department since our inception in 2006. I started as a patrol officer and kind of worked my way up through the ranks. I was a training officer, an FTO sergeant. Now I'm the chief. I've been in the role just over a couple months, but I was interim starting March of last year. So I've been in the role a little over a year. So thank you for having me tonight.
Yeah, we're happy that you're here. And like I said, it's nice to have someone with us who can really answer some really specific questions. I do want to encourage the folks who are with us tonight joining us for the webinar. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to put them into the Q&A and I will monitor that and I will field them to Paul. I'm assuming most of the questions will go to you, Paul, but I am happy to answer questions as well. So please feel free, like I said, to throw those into the Q&A as you think of them. There are a couple things I want to touch on before we jump into some of the questions. So as an educational consultant, one of the things that I try very hard to do with our families is really get them prepared to ask the right questions when they're navigating their college search process. And a question that often comes up right around this time of year, actually, which is why we originally scheduled this for this time, is that this is the time when high school seniors are either making their final decisions about colleges that they may potentially attend in the fall, but it's also the time when underclassmen are considering campus visits and are maybe even planning some spring break visits coming up or summer visits. And I think that the topic of campus safety is one that folks should be well versed in. And I think that they should know what kinds of things they should be asking as they're going on all of these visits. So I wanted to share a couple of resources before we jump in with questions with Paul. And there are a couple of great websites as you're navigating your own searches. I'm going to show a couple just really quickly that I think will be helpful for those watching, both students, parents, educators. I know we have some school counselors and some independent consultants on the call. So the first is the Campus Safety and Security site. If you're not familiar with this, and I hope, Paul, will you give me a thumbs up that that's what you're seeing is that site? Okay, great. So this site is great. It's through the U.S. Department of Education. And through this site, you can actually go in and you can search for campus safety and security data from different colleges and universities. You can do some comparison based on a variety of different characteristics of the schools. And it breaks down essentially crime and safety on campus. So if you're interested in a site that is, I would say, reputable, again, it's through the U.S. Department of Education, this is a great starting point. So for those of you, as I mentioned, I know we have some people who are going through the decision-making process right now, where they are trying to figure out which schools might be the best fit for them. This may be one tool in your toolbox. And I say that because I do think it's important for you to really weigh all kinds of things when you're trying to make those final decisions. And campus safety is just one of them that is important to look at. The other thing that I wanted to mention tonight is there is something that you can also use as a tool on your own searches, and that is using the Clery Act. And the Clery Act is helpful in that all universities and colleges that receive federal funding are required to report campus crime data through something called the Clery Act. And this recording, this information is housed on the individual college's websites. So the different colleges and universities will have reports available on their websites that you can go through and look at the different, basically different categories of crime and see data for the past 3 years. So this is available. Again, any school that's receiving federal funding is required to do this. And so I am based in Ohio, as I mentioned. So I'm just going to pull up one of our state flagship pages here. I simply Googled Clery Act, and that's CLERY, and the Ohio State University, and it took me to their Department of Public Safety. Paul mentioned he works in public safety at Case Western. So you can search, again, searching Clery Act and the name of the institution, and it will bring up all kinds of information about the safety on campus, including annual security reports. You'll be able to run those and see data that might be useful for you. So I want to just mention that because those are two things that families can do on their own and really look into. So now that we got some of the basic stuff out of the way, I want to jump into some of the questions for you, Paul, which I think is why most people are probably tuning in. So the first thing that I wanted to ask is, I want to ask a little bit, I mentioned that we've got people on the call that are potentially looking at institutions for their children. We may have some students watching this as well. In your mind, in your role, what do you think are the very key questions that these families should be asking in terms of campus safety when they're going on a campus tour or something like that? What should they ask? What's important?
I think one of the more important things is to actually see what type of, if they have a police department or if it's a security department. So there are a difference. So we are a police department, which means we're certified law enforcement officers, and we carry guns. Some police departments on colleges don't carry guns. So that's another thing to think about. And then some are just security officers, which means they would have to contact their local jurisdiction to see if something happened, they would need help from them. So that would be one of the main points I would ask. What type of security or police department does the university have? Again, if any incident happened, then you would know who would respond, whether it be university people or people from the nearest city or county.
And then in terms of resources on campus, if the family is looking at what kinds of things am I looking for that would actually indicate a level of safety on campus? So as a college consultant, for example, when I visit campuses, I find that oftentimes the tour guides will point out blue lights on campus. Are there other things that might be an indicator for a family that's visiting that, hey, this indicates to me that this feels safe? Anything that you can think of?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the blue phones are a great source. So on our campus, we have them at every entrance and exit of the dorms, and then they are sporadic throughout our campus. They are strategically placed, so walking to and from, you're not too far from a phone. And as part, depending on if your university is accredited, which we are ICLEI accredited, you actually have to check those phones every month to make sure they're working. So it's very important just to make sure that they are working. We also have cameras that are very helpful so dispatchers can keep an eye on campus and just not officers. And then what type of access do people have on campus? So our dorms and most of our buildings, not all of them yet, are card reader. So we can immediately put them in a lockdown if needed, or open them. But some doors still on our campus are a little older and we have to manually open and lock them. So what's the card access type system to get on the campus or into a building?
I think that's a really good piece of information. I don't think most people realize that maybe there's a master way to lock down those buildings that have those card readers, which I think probably I'm a parent, I have younger children, but I can imagine as a parent, knowing that should a situation occur on campus, that there was an availability for someone to, someone like you to be able to lock down the building so that people can't access those buildings just randomly. I think that's really important information. You mentioned, just going back to, you mentioned the organization or the accreditation. What is that again? What is that organization? And share just a bit about that.
Yes, so it's called ICLEI certified. There's also CLEA certification for law enforcement, and it's both, again, for police and a security department. So that just means you have extra standards you have to meet for your department. So like I said, checking emergency phones, going through certain types of training like bias-based policing yearly, hiring training, and any other special training that they request. And there's certain ones, and you get a credit every 3 years. So they come and make sure you guys have done all your proper documentations as far as like reports, and making sure you've gone all through the proper training and do all the stuff that they are requiring, like the phone checks and all that
Sure.
stuff. So again, there's quite a bit. So you can, when you're looking at the university, you can find out if they're accredited through ICLEA or Cleary. I'm sorry, CLEA.
That's really good. I had never heard of that. That's a really interesting thing. And I think that'll be a question for those families listening. That's going to be a question that they're going to be very surprised that a family will know to ask that information. So I think that's smart though. As an aside, with the things in terms of safety features on campus, is there anything that's new or coming that you feel like as a result of increased security measures on campus? What are you seeing in terms of new features on campuses that schools are implementing?
So what we just actually purchased is called Alertus, and it's an outdoor notification system. So if an emergency or even severe weather's coming, we have the ability to go over PAs, and they are strategically placed throughout campus, so we can just blast a message through there. And unfortunately, with all the active threats nowadays, you can just hit a single button, and our dispatch will be able to lock down the whole campus with just a touch of a button. So there's those upgrades for those types of things. And then the other safety things we talk about are the safety apps nowadays. And what type of apps does the university offer? We offer both a safety app, and it's called a Safe Ride app, which is if it's within the geographic location of the Safe Ride, they can get a ride to and from free of charge, and we just pick them up and take them to and from. So I know a lot of universities used to do that, but it's cost effective. So universities have gone to partnering with like Uber or Lyft.
Oh, I did not know that either. I'm learning a lot today. With things like the alert system, especially because we probably have some folks on here who do have students that are getting ready to go to school. How do students? Is that an automatic thing that students sign up for during orientation? How would they know to do that, to sign up for those alerts?
So our faculty, staff, and students are automatically in. Once they start, whether it be a student or faculty staff, that first day they start, they are automatically enrolled into it. You actually have to opt out of it at our university. And then we also have the capability where parents can sign up, or anybody really can sign up for it. We both have a 30-day alert notification. So if you come on campus for a homecoming event or to visit during family weekend, you can sign up to get the alerts that we would send out. And then there's also one that you can just sign up to get alerts all the time, and would expire when you hit the stop button. So we have that capability. So I would really strongly encourage anybody to see if those universities they're looking at has that capability. So parents or loved ones would know if something did happen on their campus, that they would get alerted, and not just relying on your student, because if they're not able to get in contact with you, you would at least know something. So because we just had an incident on Monday, the news was completely wrong, and our alerts were right because we were the ones sending it out. So I think it's important to know from the university what's going on instead of the news.
That's a really important point. I hadn't thought of that either, that the fact that you're getting the information directly from the institution, and we know, the news. I should say I'm somebody who has a master's degree in journalism, and so I know that the news, oftentimes the immediacy, they want the as quick as they can to get the information out. And sometimes it's not accurate. So I think for parents, peace of mind for sure. And for students on campus too, I think if they're especially on a larger campus where maybe they aren't, they aren't necessarily in the midst of whatever the incident is on campus, to get those alerts and know, for example, if it's a shelter in place, is it all clear? Is it, whatever those things are, as opposed to paying attention just to the news alerts, which I think that's probably good advice for, any parents or students listening, is listen to Chief Owens and listen to the alerts coming directly from the school versus just what the media is saying, because it's not coming directly from them. Who is at Case, for example, who's in charge of those alerts? Is it you? Who sends those things out?
So it's actually myself, my boss, who used to be an emergency manager. Now she's like our mayor. She's a executive director of public safety, and then we work with media relations. So the three of us get together and get the information, and then they send out the alerts between my boss and the communication center.
Okay, that makes sense. So with a question with the alerts and then subsequent communication from parents, what happens if an alert goes out to families, for example, or anybody that's signed up for those alerts, and it is a parent who's off campus somewhere, maybe in another state, another country, they get the alert. How do you instruct them to communicate, to receive, I guess, an update, for example, if they're worried about their students or something like that? Or what kind of advice, I guess, is a better question? What would you say to families when situations like that? What kind of action should they take or not take? I know that probably the immediate reaction for them would be to try to reach out to someone. But what do you think, especially in a chaotic situation, what should they really be doing?
So our biggest thing of things not to do is please don't call the police department, because they are getting flooded with stuff. And we want the best information possible. So especially if you're out of state or not even in the area, you probably don't have any really good information for us, unless your student got through to you. But hopefully they would be calling the police department first if they had good information. After that, if you can't get a hold of your students, so we have a policy, and it's something to check into, of what the university's policy is. We have to update every 15 minutes the alerts. So whether it be a new update or or the same update, we have to update it every 15 minutes. So we do make sure that people are up to date as quickly as we can. It used to be a half hour, but people thought it was too long. So we all met and said 15 minutes, and everyone, we had an incident again, like I said, on Monday, and everyone was extremely happy that they came out every 15 minutes and they felt like they were notified in a timely fashion with stuff.
Do most schools? I noticed the other day I received. I was telling Paul before we got on that oftentimes I'll get Twitter alerts about things that are happening around different campuses, and I saw on one of the websites one of the institutions where there was an incident happening, that they were posting those also in live. To your point, every 15 minutes on their website as well. Is that something that most schools do? Do you think, or is Case doing that? Okay, so it's somewhere that the people could access that as well.
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, we have all of our alerts are hooked up to our social media accounts and the banner. I know Ohio State does that too. So
okay, good to know. So what about in terms of a student? If you mentioned the security, having the ability to have someone come and take you if you're feeling unsafe from one part of campus to the other, especially in the evenings. What about reporting from students about maybe they see someone suspicious on campus, maybe they're feeling like something is off? How does that reporting happen to you, to the security office? How do they do that?
yeah, so actually we were fortunate enough, this year was our first year for us to actually do a safety presentation to the incoming freshmen. So we go over the safety presentation, which kind of talks about if you see something suspicious, call us. We will go out to make sure you feel safe, and any call, like whether it be you think somebody's suspicious, somebody's following you, or you need a lockout of your vehicle, something that small, we'll be more than happy. And all police departments around the country have been more than happy to come and just make sure everything's okay and make sure you check out okay. But just call. If you feel unsafe, just call. There's no harm in calling the local police department if it's the university's police department or the local police department. And I think that's something super important. A lot of out-of-state students don't realize that. For us, like if you call 911, it's actually not going to go to our police department. It's going to go to the city of Cleveland. So even knowing those differences and being able to explain to students, faculty, and staff, like, I know you're used to calling 911, but they don't know the buildings as well as our officers do. So we really want you to call us. And that's on our app too, where you can just hit a button and it'll go straight to our dispatch instead of having to call us.
That's really good advice. And like you said, not something that probably most students are even aware of. One question came through on the Q&A. And again, if anybody has other questions, please throw them in there. Paul is here to answer these for us. So what's the norm in terms of how frequently is someone monitoring the cameras, the action on the cameras on campus that you said that are set up? Is someone sitting there watching them all day? How does that happen?
So it just depends on the university setup. So on our campus, we have over 200 cameras. We do have some security officers who are different from police officers in our building. So our dispatch watches cameras. If the buildings have cameras, those security officers watch them. And then we also have cameras that just sit in certain areas that we know that have higher theft rates, and like bike thefts or in the libraries with the laptops. So they do, our dispatch sits and watches them, and then some security officers in buildings, if they have cameras inside those buildings, they do sit and watch them. And then we also use them for technology. We just got like license plate readers. So if there are crimes going in and out, they can start reading the license plates. So we have that for after the fact. So we have all that stuff. So it just all depends on, like I said, and that's another question you can ask too, is do you guys have a dispatch center or is it somewhere else? So not all police departments have dispatch centers on campus.
That's good to know. With the security in buildings, and I'm thinking in particular a residence hall, oftentimes they'll have students sitting at a check-in desk of some sort. Do you know, and again, maybe it's just with, I guess I'm just asking you about case because it's probably what you know, but are those students or people who are at those desks, do they receive any kind of safety training in terms of people coming in and out? I mean, I'm sure that they get some kind of information about, not propping doors and all of that, but you, and do you think that should be something that's standard if it's not?
Yeah, I definitely think that should be some standard, even just going over scenarios with students, because we've actually just started hiring more student staff in between our building and even some of these buildings that we have on campus, just because they have the work study and it's a little cheaper. But to go through some scenarios in case the security guard's not there, what you should do if you see this, or if somebody comes in hurt, what would you do? So I think that's super important to start training everybody, so everybody can just react after the training instead of just freezing. So that's what we always talk about. We don't want people to freeze, we want people to be able to react and help people. And we don't have it at Case, but I know the bigger schools do have a lot of student workers inside the dorms, making sure people just with the proper IDs come in there.
So we had another question, and this one again, maybe case specific, but I can maybe chime in too once you answer, Paul, about the top safety incidents that happen on campuses. I've looked at so many Clery reports over the years, which I will tell you, when we, like, as I mentioned, when we work with students, oftentimes we'll have families who have concerns about an institution because of its location. For example, they may say this is an urban campus and I'm concerned about crime there, which an interesting anecdote is that oftentimes you'd be surprised if you run those comparisons. It's not always just the urban campuses that have incidents, and vice versa. Urban campuses don't always have incidents. It's I think it goes against what a lot of people will think. But what are some of the most common safety occurrences that you feel like you're seeing on campus?
So our big ones are thefts, especially of bicycles and laptops. The bicycles, so another program we have, and this is things you can ask, is we actually give out free bike locks to all the students. They have like a $5,000 guarantee on them, because a lot of times students will just bring the chain locks, and it takes a couple seconds for the bad people to cut them off. So we offer bike locks. We offer also laptop locks. Again, people are sitting in the library studying, they've got to go to the bathroom real quick. Our library is open to the public till a certain time, so it takes 2 seconds to take that computer and walk away with it. So theft's our biggest thing. We've had a couple robberies on campus, none this year, thankfully, but thefts is our biggest. And then I would say our next biggest would be robberies. But as Christina said, I would really encourage you guys to look at the school's public safety website. And I don't know if anybody saw it, but they do have a daily crime log where you can actually look. And it's part of clear. It's a requirement where departments have to put the crimes that's happened on their campus.
That's good. And I really think it's important for when families are looking at schools. Again, I think I had asked Paul, we'll talk about maybe a couple of myths. That's probably one of the biggest ones, is just about the assumption of this kind of school is located in this area, and I'm going to assume because of that it is safe or unsafe either way. And so I think, looking at some of that data is actually really eye-opening, and I didn't know about the daily log, so that's really helpful, Paul. Thank you for that. One other question. So you mentioned, as an example, the case library is open to the public. I have seen other institutions where, whether it's the library, the fitness center, there are public facilities on campus. What kinds of security measures are in place to ensure safety in those places when they are open to the public?
So on our campus, so for the library, for example, you just have to show an ID during certain hours. Right now, because we're during the school year, it's open to the public till 10 o'clock. And then once we close the public, we actually send an officer to do a sweep of the building to make sure all the proper people are in there. For our gyms, you actually have to have a case ID or a community card to actually enter there. And we do have people checking those. And then in our student center, it's open to anybody. When the doors are open, anybody can go in there. But we do have security inside that building for if there would be a problem, but anybody can go in those buildings. And
what about the academic buildings on campus? Are those open during certain hours?
Yeah, they're open during certain hours. Even though it's a private campus, it's still open to the public. But if somebody who is not supposed to be on the campus is there, we have the right to remove them.
Okay. Well, this is all super helpful information. Are there any other questions that families should be asking, or any myths that you want to share that you just want to dispel before we wrap up?
So I would say my biggest advice, if you guys do have any questions or concerns about safety on campus, reach out to the police chief or the director of security for that institution. I actually had somebody call me the other day asking, hey, we're coming from out of town, we're looking for an apartments, where would you recommend living if your kid was going there? And then also, when you're talking to them, you can see what programs the department offers. Like we offer ALICE training, which has to do with active threat. We offer RAD programs, which is rape, aggression, defense. And then this year we actually I have 2 officers who are faculty now because they're actually teaching in a PE class of self-defense. So we feel it's super important to let students and staff know who we are outside the uniform, and then B, to hopefully make them feel more protected after going through some of these trainings and classes. So I really encourage, if you guys had any types of questions, to reach out to that local department and ask and have a conversation with them.
I'm glad that you're saying that, because I think sometimes families don't think about that you are accessible, and that is just as families may stop by, for example, the disability services office to ask about things. This is another office or a space on campus where there's questions that should be asked. Do you encourage students, for example, if they're coming to campus? I know I've had students who've purchased personal alarms or even mace or something like that. Do you encourage students to do that? Is that something that families should add to their packing list?
So they would have to check the policies on that. Like I know on our campus, you cannot have mace or anything that would hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Off record, as a father, I would want my daughter to carry a mace or a little stun gun. As long as you use it properly, because we've had some people use it in a bar and say, look what I got. So
Yes.
as long as you're using it for the right reasons, you would not get in trouble. So
Got it. Okay. And I know and I feel like the personal alarms that students have, I've had several students over the years that have, that truly it has been one of the things that they put on their list of things to check off before they head to campus. The other thing I'd say is, just like you mentioned earlier, I'd recommend for everybody listening, something that we touched on at the beginning in terms of checklist items. So Paul mentioned about the local security numbers and things like that. I would say before you depart campus and drop your child off and let them free into the world, I would make sure that they have whatever numbers those are in their phones, those apps in their phones, have all of those things set up before leaving campus. It's so much better to be, Paul and I were talking about this before we logged on, it's better to be proactive in things and be overly protective versus, having to retroactively try to figure out how to get in touch, how to do those things. And I will say, as someone who took a self-defense class in college as well, many moons ago, I think that's great that you guys are doing that and offering those kinds of things to students on campus too. You can, you never know when that kind of thing might be handy. So we had one last question. So a question came in: is a police department on campus a common thing? Have you heard that as a common? Is it mostly larger urban campuses that have them, or is it just random?
It's random, but I think a lot more universities and colleges are moving towards armed officers, just because, again, all the active threats we've had, unfortunately, within the past couple of years. That's why we became a police department. We had an active shooter in 2004, and we became a police department in 2006. So I think it's becoming more common to have armed officers, whether it be security or police, on campus.
Okay, good to know. Well, I'm so appreciative of you taking the time. I know it's hard for everyone listening. This is valuable time for a campus safety officer in general, but I'm glad that you were able to take the time with us, and I feel like you answered a lot of questions and shared some really good advice in a short amount of time. And folks, if you've got questions, feel free to reach out to us. We at Estrella, you can email us at info@estrellaconsulting.com or our website, estrellaconsulting.com. I'm planning also to put together a companion blog post with these tips in them, so that'll be on our website as well. So feel free to check that out. And thank you, Chief Owens, for being here with us tonight. Super valuable information. I hope it is a very uneventful evening this evening for you and the rest of the semester. But thanks everybody for joining us tonight, and enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.